By normal aquarium logic, this tank should be covered in algae. There's leaf litter breaking down, snails everywhere, biofilm, mulm. I haven't done any water changes, plants going all over the place, and just letting it do its thing. But somehow, my tank has absolutely zero algae. So today, I want to talk through why I think my ecosystem style tanks stay balanced. Because I don't think the answer is that I'm keeping them clean or constantly maintaining them. I think the answer is that at the very base of them, they're more alive than a typical aquarium, and that is the key to long-term success. And these aquariums I showed you are not sterile at all. I have dead leaves in them, I let biofilm grow, I don't do any sort of gravel vacuuming or water change, and I leave the detritus and the mulm. And honestly, that's kind of the point. I'm trying to build a little ecosystem, and tanks where plants, snails, bacteria, microfauna, and eventually larger fish like a betta fish are all part of the same ecosystem, just like you'd find in nature. So yes, there's probably excess nutrients in the water column. There's tons of waste from all the organisms living in this tank and just tons of things breaking down. But that doesn't automatically mean that algae is going to overtake my aquarium. In fact, I'm even trying to grow algae in these tanks, and for some reason they're just so rock solid, so stable, that I can't even get algae to take over. One of the main reasons for the success and stability of my aquariums is obviously the plants. Algae usually shows up when there's light, nutrients, and not enough competition to take those nutrients and light away from them. So these plants are growing, they're spreading their roots and pulling all the nutrients they can out of the water column before algae can even get a chance to dominate and take over. So instead of constantly fighting algae and trying to keep my tank sterile, I'm building a system that simply outcompetes it. It does better than what the algae could even do when it tries to take over my aquarium. The second reason I think my tanks are so stable is because they're full of tiny creatures that make up a true food web. These snails are constantly grazing on my plants, glass, and pretty much any surface they can get to. Microfauna is moving through the leaf litter, and little organisms are breaking down the waste before it even has a chance to become a bigger problem. There's a difference between a traditional sterile aquarium where you're having a singular fish and doing maintenance all the time, and an ecosystem tank where you're creating a complete location where all the different life forms that would make up a traditional wild aquatic food web can live together in an aquarium, in your own home. And it's just more exciting. There's so much more to see, so many more interesting creatures to watch and interact with. And microfauna is very affordable. They fit in any size aquarium. And in the end, they're also free fish food. And the best part is this methodology scales perfectly. This is my 1 gallon ecosystem tank that I'm building. And even in this 1 gallon, it has leaf litter, tons of biofilm, and tons of tiny microfauna that's slowly starting to take hold. Now, a single gallon aquarium is an incredibly fragile ecosystem, so I'm watching it very closely. But the idea is the same. If there's enough biology using the nutrients, algae really doesn't have a chance to take over this tank. And so far, it's been incredibly stable and maintenance-free. Another highly underrated factor for tank stability when fighting off algae is your lighting. Now, I'm not using the most powerful, most expensive lights for these tanks. In fact, I'm using some very simple, very cheap LEDs I bought on Amazon. And I'd rather have slower plant growth and more control over my aquariums rather than risking using a super high powered light and blasting the tank with too much light and causing an instability. And I want to be really clear, algae is not evil. In fact, it's a cornerstone of every aquatic environment on planet Earth, from the ocean to your local river or lake. There's no reason to completely take algae out of the equation. But the issue is when you have too much, right? And it completely dominates the ecosystem within your aquarium and takes over, and it makes your tank ugly, right? And you don't want an ugly aquarium. So my goal is to never have no algae in my tanks, but to have the right amount. And building a combination of an environment that prioritizes the things that you find pleasing, like plants and microfauna, and controlling your lighting and how you manage your tanks, and then filling it with organisms that feed off the algae, is just a winning combination for you to create a tank that's stable, less hands-on to keep it looking great, but then also just far more fun to watch. And that's why I think these ecosystem style aquariums, they don't take a lot of extra effort to set up, but if you're intentional with how you build out your next tank and follow this type of methodology, I can promise you it might be one of the most fun aquariums you'll ever see in the hobby. And this is really why I'm so interested in ecosystem style betta tanks. I'm not just trying to build a clean aquarium that I have to maintain all the time. I'm trying to build something stable enough to feel alive. A tank where you get plants, snails, unique microfauna, and where the fish connects with that environment and is honestly better off for it. And I want to be clear, setting up a tank like this is not a magic trick. It doesn't mean you can overfeed, blast them with light, ignore the tank, and boom, you have an ecosystem, right? It's all about finding balance. And the difference is really observation. I'm always watching these tanks, seeing what's going on, and then if something doesn't seem right or is going wrong, then I act and adjust and try to help the entire tank find the right equilibrium that I'm chasing after. And that's really why I think my aquariums should have algae, but they really don't. It's not because they're spotless clean. It's not because I found some secret product on Amazon, but it's really because the combination of plants, snails, microorganisms, light, and decay are starting to balance each other out, and all together these different factors work together to find a true balance. So if you want to learn how I build an ecosystem nano tank for betta fish, or just some beginner guides, definitely subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching this video.